The Great Pyramid of Giza. For several years, archaeologists and explorers have been trying to figure out how and why it was built. The Great Pyramid of Giza is the biggest pyramid in Egypt and houses the tomb of Fourth Dynasty pharaoh Khufu. The oldest of the seven wonders of the ancient world and the only one to have largely survived is the pyramid, which was constructed in the early 26th century BC. It borders the current Giza in Greater Cairo, Egypt, and is a part of the Giza Pyramid complex. For more than 3,800 years, the Great Pyramid held the record for the tallest man-made structure in the world when it first stood at 146.6 meters, 481 feet. The pyramid's height was reduced through time to its current 138.5 meters by the removal of the majority of the smooth white limestone casing. The core structure that underlies is what is visible now. The base's volume, which includes an interior hillock, is estimated to be about 2.6 million cubic meters, or about 230.3 meters square. The structure had a height of 146.7 meters, a base length of 230.6 meters, and a slope of 51 degrees 50'40". A total of 2.3 million massive blocks weighing a combined 6 million tons were quarried for the construction of the Great Pyramid. The majority of stones have uneven sizes and shapes and have pretty minimal dressing. Mortar joined the outer layers together. Local limestone from the Giza Plateau was primarily utilized. Other building materials were transported down the Nile by boat, including granite blocks from Aswan that might weigh up to 80 tons and white limestone from Tura for the casing. There are 3 known chambers inside the Great Pyramid. The pyramid's base was cut into the bedrock, but the lowest level was left incomplete. Higher up in the pyramidal construction are the so-called Queen's Chamber and King's Chamber, which both contain granite sarcophagi. Some people think that Hemianu, also known as Haemon, Khufu's vizier, was responsible for designing the Great Pyramid. Many different scientific and non-science theories make an effort to describe the precise construction methods. The tombs for Khufu's personal family and court, which included 3 smaller pyramids for Khufu's wives, an even smaller satellite pyramid, and 5 buried solar barges, could all be found in the complex of funerary structures that surrounded the pyramid. The Great Pyramid was historically attributed to Khufu based on the writings of classical antiquity authors, particularly Herodotus and Diodorus Siculus. However, during the Middle Ages, a number of different individuals, such as Joseph, Nimrod, or King Sword, were also given credit for building the pyramid. 4 more relieving chambers were discovered in 1837, above the King's Chamber, after tunneling there. The previously inaccessible chambers were covered with red-painted hieroglyphs. The gang names, which contained the pharaoh's name, were written on the blocks by the workmen who were constructing the pyramid. For example, the gang, the white crown of Khnum Khufu is mighty. On the walls, Khufu's name was written more than a dozen times. Guyon discovered another of these graffitis on a 4th-layer pyramid outside block. The inscriptions are similar to those discovered at other Khufu sites, including the alabaster quarry at Hatnub and the harbor at Wadi al-Jarf, and they can also be found in other pharaohs' pyramids. The nearby cemeteries were dug during much of the 20th century. The East Field, south of the causeway, and the West Field were used for the burials of Khufu's family members and high-ranking officials. In particular, Hemianu, Ankhof, and the funerary cache of Hetepherzai, Khufu's mother, as well as the wives, children, and grandchildren of Khufu. According to Hassan, from the early dynasty periods, it was always the practice for the relatives, friends, and courtiers to be buried in the neighborhood of the king they had served throughout life. This was completely consistent with Egyptian ideas about the afterlife. Up to the 6th dynasty, the cemeteries were vigorously enlarged but were then less often used. Khufu's seal imprints are the earliest known pharaonic names, while Pepitu's are the most recent. Some of the tombstones also had writing on them, such as Mddw, Horus name for Khufu, which was engraved on the mastaba of Chufunak, who was perhaps Khufu's grandson. Like the pyramid, the mastaba's burial chambers were occasionally devoid of inscriptions, however some of the inscriptions inside mention Khufu or his pyramid. For instance, Merzion III's inscription declares, her mother is the daughter of the king of Upper and Lower Egypt Khufu. For instance, Snnw Ka, chief of the settlement and overseer of the pyramid city of Ahed Khufu, or Marib, Priest of Khufu, are examples of titles that frequently include similar connections. Many tomb owners also include a king's name in their own name, for example Shufajadif, Chufuzaneb, Marashufu. Snfru, Khufu's father, is the first king at Giza to be referenced in that way. Hassan discovered an Amenhotep II stela in 1936 close to the Great Sphinx of Giza, suggesting that throughout the New Kingdom, Khufu and Khafre were still credited with building the two larger pyramids. It says, when he was young, he yoked the horses in Memphis and stopped in the sanctuary of Hor-Ammahet, the Sphinx. He took his time exploring it and admiring the sanctuary of Khufu and Khafre, the revered splendor. At the south foot of the pyramid, two boat pits were found buried in 1954, one of which contained the Khufu ship. On numerous of the blocks that protected the boat pits, the jade for cartouche could be seen. He was most likely in charge of Khufu's funeral because he was the heir and oldest son. Examining the second boat pit began in 1987, and excavation work began in 2010. 4 times the name Khufu, 11 times the name jade for a year, in rain, season, month, and day, measurements of the stone, numerous signs and symbols, and a construction reference line were all written in red or black ink on the stones. Wadi al-Jarf is where the Diary of Merwa was discovered in 2013 during excavations. The Great Pyramid, referred to in the text by its original name Ahet Khufu dozens of times, is described as to be transporting white limestone stones from Torah. By using two main methods, it has been determined that the Great Pyramid is approximately 4,600 years old, directly, by radiocarbon dating of organic material discovered in the pyramid and used in its mortar, and indirectly, by its attribution to Khufu and his chronological age, based on archaeological and textual evidence.